How beautiful on the mountains are the feet of those who bring good news, who proclaim peace, who bring good tidings, who proclaim salvation, who say to Zion, your God reigns. Listen, your watchmen lift up their voices. Together they shout for joy. When the Lord returns to Zion, they will see it with their own eyes. Burst into songs of joy together, you ruins of Jerusalem, for the Lord has comforted his people. He has redeemed Jerusalem. The Lord will lay bare his holy arm in the sight of all the nations, and all the ends of the earth will see the salvation of our God. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Now, I've got written down what I was going to say at the beginning, but that got me in trouble once. I was going to say, what's the best Christmas present you ever received? But that invites you to speak to me, and I don't want you to speak to me right now. You could later. I want to hear all about it. But I'll just go straight to what my favorite Christmas present is instead of you telling me about yours. But my favorite, I've got it here this morning. It's small enough to carry around with me. Is a mug. You could probably tell that when I pulled it out. It's a mug. It's a particular kind of mug. I got this in 1990. This is it says Collector's Edition Buffalo Bills. It has the signature of all the players on the 1990 Buffalo Bills roster. For those of you playing at home, this is the first year they went to the Super Bowl and lost. So that in itself is not why it's my favorite. That's a painful memory. But it means so much to me. I hold this mug and I put a cup of coffee in it, or hot chocolate, or tea, or whatever. And it's like I put my hands around the warm mug and I can feel the clean, crisp fall air in western New York again. And I remember going to a Bills games with my dad. One game each year, just the two of us, and how we'd go and tailgate and the whole deal. And I remember going 2 Octobers ago with my dad and my son, just the three of us, to a Bills game in the fall. And football in the fall reminds me of playing outside. We would play football all day long, all the kids in our neighborhood, until it was time to come in for supper, or it just got too dark out to see anything and the football was hitting everybody in the face and we couldn't catch it anymore. Or how my parents would take my sister and I to Susie's Pizzeria in my hometown. That place has been closed for over 20 years, but we used to go to Susie's Pizzeria and eat pizza and play the pinball machine, and then they would bundle us up like the kid from A Christmas Story, and we would go and cheer on the local high school football team. So it's just a mug, yeah, but it means so much more. My childhood and all that was good about it, and my family and my friends and my loved ones are somehow invested in this mug. You have stuff like that? You have those things that they point to so much more than what they actually are. But the thing about this mug is that it's only recently that it became my favorite thing. It took 25 years to look back on it and realize that it was my favorite gift that I'd ever gotten, because even on the day that I got it wasn't that big a deal. But my mom, she had a way of, every Christmas was a different theme. And so, like, one year was G.I. Joe, and one year was whatever. Well, this year, 1990, was Buffalo Bills year. And I remember I got a Buffalo Bills chair for my bedroom. I got a big old Buffalo Bills blanket to wrap up in, and the biggest and best gift I got that year was a starter Bills winter jacket. And if you were raised in the 90s, you know all about starter jackets. Everybody had to have a starter jacket, those ones that came over your head. And if you didn't have one at school, you were totally uncool. But not only did I get one, I got the coolest starter jacket ever. It was black and red and blue. It was cool, it was awesome, and it was the envy of the whole school. And I remember opening that gift, the biggest gift in the biggest box, and getting that coat. And I literally ran around the house whooping and shouting. And then I came back to my parents and threw my arms around them. It was the greatest gift ever. And it was the best Christmas ever. And I can't for the life of me tell you where that mug was that day. Except that I know it was there because I still have it. For a 10-year-old boy, the mug was just too small. It was too small to be noticed in the midst of all the other bigger, cooler stuff. Again, it's only 25 years later that I realized the importance of that mug. Because even though it's small and insignificant, then now it is huge. And all the other stuff, I mean, you outgrow the coat. I don't know where the blanket is. I don't know that I ever really cared about the desk chair. It's all gone. But it's the small stuff that matters. And maybe you have stuff like that too. Things that you almost missed the first time around, but they mean the world to you now. The big, flashy things catch your eye in the moment, but it's the smaller, less noticeable things that matter the most. I mean, ask yourself, what's going to matter 30 years down the line? A Lexus with a big red bow on it? It'd be pretty nice, yeah. But what's going to matter more, a Lexus with a big red bow on it, or that piece of macaroni art that your kid brought home from school and it wrote in terrible handwriting, "I love you, Mommy"? How about the best video game system there is out there, or the day that your dad took off work on a busy week to take you fishing? Dinner at a luxury resort, or a cup of coffee with that friend you haven't seen in years? The best gifts aren't always the biggest ones. And most of the time, it's actually the smallest things that end up mattering the most. The things you may not even notice now become the things you don't ever want to let go of later. And that's really one of the main points of the Bible passages you just heard me read. The best gifts aren't always the biggest ones. John and Isaiah are both talking about what they think is the greatest gift of all, God's salvation. Both of them are talking about how God will save his people, Israel, and how through that all people everywhere will experience God's salvation. These are scriptures about how God is saving the world. And that's really what Christmas is about, isn't it? It's about God sending the world by sending his son Jesus into it. There aren't any Christmas surprises here. But there's a piece of each of them that points to what I'm talking about. Isaiah wrote, "When the Lord returns to Zion," that's Jerusalem, Zion. "When the Lord returns to Jerusalem, they will see it with their own eyes." That's Jerusalem that had been beaten down and battered by the Babylonian Empire, destroyed to ruins. They would see it. And John was telling the story of how God did come to Zion to save his people, but they didn't all see him. John said, Jesus was in the world, and though the world was made through him, it did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own. It's his own people, people of Israel. He came to his own people, but his own people did not receive him. God had come right into the middle of the people he promised to come to. God had settled in right alongside the hurting, broken world, and most people totally missed it. They were looking in all the wrong places. The Jews of that day, if they expected anybody to come, they expected a Messiah to come to raise an army and crush the Roman Empire and then ride triumphantly into Jerusalem and establish God's kingdom from there. And the Romans, they looked for the most powerful threat to their existence and sought to eliminate any of those threats, to kill and wipe out anything big and powerful enough to threaten their empire. And God planted the seed right there in the midst of them all. And they had no clue. They were all looking for the biggest, brightest, most powerful thing, and they missed God showing up right there in the middle of everything. Jesus was born to a poor couple from a poor town in the middle of nowhere. God gave the world a small, unassuming gift, and it was the greatest gift of all. But almost everybody had no idea that it had been given in the first place. This Christmas, I'd like you to think about the question, what if God is doing the same thing today that God did back then? What if, while we're all busy looking at the biggest, brightest things in our world, God is planting his saving grace and truth all around us, but we're missing it because we're looking in all the wrong places? Think about it. What do we spend our time doing? I know what I spend my time doing. We spend our time and effort debating national politics, right? Yeah, we got some caucuses coming up, some primaries. I don't know, maybe you've heard of some of the people. Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, good stuff. Woo, we get all invested in it and heated. We argue over what such and such multi-millionaire presidential candidate said this past week. We pour our money and our time into movies and TV shows so super rich actors can entertain us. We buy magazines and watch shows that do nothing but tell us about their lives. The juicy gossip, all of that. What's going on with the Kardashians or whoever's popular this week? I don't know. It's awful when you get a little older and you start to look at the magazines and they had the Entertainment Weekly People of the Year, the year in review, and half the folks I've never heard of before. But we're spending our time and energy investing in these people. And like Bills games, we spend our hard-earned cash to buy tickets to go watch athletes who make more in a game than you make all year. There was one guy, broken down, made more in an hour than I made in a year. Isn't that insane? Just like the people back then were fixated on glamour and celebrity, probably even more than the people back then. It's so easy to get drawn away and miss what God's doing right in the middle of it. If God's doing the same thing now that he was doing back then you are going to have a hard time finding God in all the big stuff. You're more likely to find him in the small places. In your mealtime conversations, if you still have mealtime conversations. In the ordinary day at the office, that's just the same as every other day before it and every other day after. And time spent in quiet reflection, in poor, hurting people all around you, downtown, here in our city, in your neighborhood. You'll find God in times of illness and pain and grief far more than you find him in the times when you're running around the house because he's got the greatest Christmas present ever. God is at work all over the place. Just maybe not where you're used to looking. And one of the reasons I love this mug so much is that I just got it back. And what I mean is, I thought I had lost it, and it had been gone so long that I forgot that I ever had it in the first place. I had it when I got married and when I moved to Atlanta, and then I lost it. It went somewhere in the move from Atlanta to North Carolina over 10 years ago. And it's been gone so long that I didn't know it existed anymore. And then, not when I moved here at the end of April, but when my family came and all the moving van, and when they pulled away, I went into our room, and there sitting on the bookshelf was this. And then that day I sounded like my 10-year-old self opening up the Bill starter jacket. I said to Summer, "Oh my gosh, where did this come from? Where did you find this?" I mean, we moved 3 times in North Carolina, and this mug was nowhere, and now it's back. And I am never going to let it go. You can pry this from my cold, dead hands. Because it means something. I mean, to me, it means everything. So much more. My prayer for you is that if you've lost sight of where God is in your life, in the world, this Christmas, you would find at least just a glimpse of where God is, just enough to keep you going, just enough to take the next step, just enough to plant that seed so salvation can grow in your life. But if you're going to find where God is, don't start in the big places. Start in the places where nobody expects there to be holiness and hope and sacredness and all those sorts of things. In places of pain and discomfort and illness and poverty. In the lives of hurting people. In places of loneliness and depression and despair. Go there and you may just find God. Go in the unlikely places to find the greatest gift of all. And may it be for you the greatest gift you receive this Christmas or ever. Amen.